I'm going to, I think the first slide is almost a contradiction to my style, probably, which is this speaks of a sort of a gentle way of life in some ways. We are somewhere, I think that the image is entitled the Brendan Valley, so it's somewhere near Malmesmead in 1935. And I don't apologise for the slide at all, because it's a snapshot I've taken of an image that's on my office wall, because I like this image. It has a particular quality. It'll contrast to my style, because a bit like fast food, I think I'm trying to do too much in too short a space. So probably going to get indigestion, hopefully you won't, but I will rattle through and see if I can do it in the time allotted. Is this bucolic? No, this is about the past, but I'm not trying to go back to the past, okay? So I've had that accusation a number of times, we just want to take us back to the past. No, absolutely not. We want the past to inform the future. And I hope that, if you take nothing from what I say next, take that. And yes, obviously, as you get older, you think about what you did when you were young. And ironically, although this is me in the 1960s, the way of life in the west coast of Ireland in the 1960s was more akin to the 1930s. So yes, farmers did go salmon fishing until it was extinguished by commercial trawlers offshore. And yes, we did get involved in things like that. Isn't age a wonderful thing, because you get this kind of perspective on that sort of life. So I better come clean before I go any further, I think. So this one's definitions, misconceptions and confessions. Nature recovery in a cultural landscape, what is he talking about? Well, in terms of nature recovery, a quick trip on Google takes you to various websites, and I particularly like this one. I'm going to come back to that. In terms of the cultural landscape, we tend to think of Stonehenge, we tend to think of cathedrals, we tend to think of big buildings by and large. We might think of big designed landscapes. In fact, that's part of the definition. The universal definition of cultural landscapes tends to encompass parklands, extensive garden, parkland landscapes, that sort of thing. I'm going to challenge that in this talk very fundamentally. And why this image? Well, I quite like this because there's nothing much natural in that photograph that I can see. Okay. Let's start with the protected landscape we're in and why we are. And we are a Category 5 protected landscape, and I put it in red for you. We're that because of the interaction of people and nature over time, which has produced significant ecological, biological, cultural and scenic value. And where, this is the important bit, safeguarding the integrity of this interaction is vital. I hope you get where I'm going now with this. Another concept, we've had an awful lot from Ralph in a very short period of time, but I'm going to throw in biocultural heritage, which in a sense overlaps and falls between what we've been talking about. I'll pick out some phrases there. I'm going to try and get away from text, but I'm going to just pick out a few phrases. The continuing losses of biodiversity around the world remain problematic for nature conservation. Yeah, you can say that again. A fundamental issue that's triggered debates in nature conservation is the relationship between human culture, heritage and history and nature expressed as ecology or biodiversity. Traditionally, nature conservation has been pursued separately from aspects of cultural heritage. You only have to look at the way government approaches these two subjects to know they're completely different departments. Does that help? I don't think it does. And we delight in protected landscapes and having purposes that bring those different areas together. And there's a strength in that. It's a situation which seems perplexing when we consider the importance of traditional management in the maintenance of biodiversity in many areas now protected for nature. So that's current academic thinking. Now, on Exmoor, there are virtually no places that are natural. And if you want to look at natural ecosystems, you are really on the end of a rope, literally and metaphorically, I guess. And I love this particular set of photographs showing Kester Webb somewhere down the cliff, gathering samples of, and who of you have seen this? Some of you, but I'm sure more than I, maybe, but some of the yew trees, the ancient yews that cling to our cliffs and are completely underrepresented in our knowledge for very, very obvious reasons. It's incredibly difficult to study them, to and to see them. We don't know the ages of these forests. They are incredibly rare nationally and probably internationally. We know very little about them. But for me, reaching towards what is natural on Exmoor takes me into this sort of territory. A very old slide, 2009, so I'm sure you don't remember it, because I didn't. If I summarise how the cultural landscape has been shaped on Exmoor, very much, I think the bowl, I can't see the bowl here, but very much a period Ralph has talked about, the Neolithic Bronze Age transition and settlement, the creation and development of the Royal Forest of Exmoor, 18th and 19th century reclamation, which Ralph touched on, and the development of the great estates, and fourthly, and very importantly, the continuum. It's all about today, isn't it? But it's not. We are on this continuum. And so that landscape out there is a palimpsest of gradual layering. We know this, but we forget it very often. And we are contributing to that in positive and negative ways as we go. And there are two big themes that run right the way through the last 8,000 years, and they are agriculture and industry. How cultural are we, really? I thought we'd go to Horner Woods, because it's just up the road from here. And it's, gosh, so many favourite places on Exmoor, but one of my favourite places on Exmoor. It is absolutely a cultural landscape. It is shaped entirely by human activity over the last 2,000 years. Industrial activity, and then more recently estate activity, but a series of very specific human interventions over time that have created this remarkable diversity. The trees are, if that's not archaeology, then tell me what is. This tree is 1,000 years old. There's charcoal burning, there's field boundaries stretching off into the woodlands, there's arable fields in the woodlands from 500 years ago. It's an extraordinary landscape. Do we value it? Yes, we do. So wildlife designations on Exmoor, I've blown up the area that we're talking about, and you can see it's a terrible mess of designations, they're all on top of each other. It's so important ecologically because of those human interventions over at least 2,000 years. But let's focus on stuff that's a little bit more recent, shall we? This is Driver Farm. It's owned by the National Park Authority. It was purchased by Somerset County Council in the 1960s. It's a 400-acre farm, and when it was purchased, it was put with pinkery, so we have a land mass there of about 900 acres. The farm dates from the 1840s, and when it was created by Frederick Wynne Knight, the first tenants produced Stilton cheese there. It was dairy farming, it was very high-end agriculture, and the average tenancy was 3 years. Some packed up after 2. It wasn't until 30 years in that there were tenants who actually could understand what was needed to make it work. Well, it's lovely, isn't it? Now, in terms of rewilding, what will we do here? We probably want to see this softened back. We want to see much more woodland in the combes. Peatland restoration has already happened, as we know. That kind of thing. However, as the National Park Authority, we're enormously proud that it was notified as a SSSI in July 2021 for the extraordinary assemblages of waxcap fungi that we find there. In other words, this is a cultural creation, this SSSI. Because of that intensive grassland management, we have the ideal conditions for waxcap. So that land management has to continue in that way for those species. And if you look at the prescriptions that Plant Life recommends for those kind of species, existing drains are maintained, so no drain blocking, no tree or scrub encroachment, and continuous pasture, a short swards preferably. So for those rewilders amongst you, that is probably the opposite of rewilding. But that's a SSSI, and it was created last year. And as I say, we are really proud of that and the incredible species diversity we've got in there in terms of waxcaps. It's difficult stuff, isn't it? Let's not forget the knowledge, okay? This is Ashway. Let's not forget the knowledge that's sort of somehow contained in these places. So Ashway's first mentioned at Doomsday and continued pretty well all the way through, really. An incredible embedding of knowledge of that landscape and how that landscape works. And field patterns and woodland that has, in a sense, been evolved and created and altered to respond to those conditions. And that's one of the reasons that we've suggested to the Exmoor Society, and the Exmoor Society has funded a draft project design which is intended, I'm going to mention very briefly, intended to sort of have a full frontal, if you like, look at Exmoor's farming heritage and try and understand, we're not interested in just buildings or just archaeology, we're interested in how farming systems in the past shaped what we now value. Whether they're listed buildings or triple SIs or county wildlife sites, how have those processes led to what we understand and value and designate as important today? We have this huge lack of understanding in respect of that. So that's not looking at the past for its own sake, not just that, it's looking at the past for its own sake and to inform us going into the future. You'd think this would be a very basic thing to be doing, but it's quite unusual to take an approach like this. And what we're hoping now with this piece of work, it's been completed. It's a project design, effectively. We're now trying to get funding together to actually look at a group of farms on Exmoor. We haven't even thought about where yet. And to sort of help us understand the processes that have led to what we value there. Just over a year ago, we launched our nature recovery vision, which all of you in this room will be familiar with, so I'm not going to go into it. My confession, which I didn't do at the beginning, is I'm not an ecologist and I'm not a farmer. I know a bit about cultural landscapes and a lot about the uplands, I think. So I'm not going to claim to be any of those things. So I'm not going to say much about the nature recovery vision. It landed in different ways, as you can see and as you probably know. So described as Exmoor as showing what a 21st century national park can look like, or if you take the other view, farmers warn Exmoor will turn into a rich boys' playground. We know that, we've been through that. The vision is an incredibly strong document and sets a direction. But the big question is, how do you achieve that vision? And how do you get there? It's all very well to have a vision, but how do you get there? Let's just remind ourselves before we go any further that English National Park authorities, it's a blank slide because I want you to read it. English National Park authorities currently have no direct powers in respect of nature conservation and nature recovery. Oh my God. Nothing. Well, moving on to finance then. Current expectations and pressures on national parks, and you can read that, I'll skip over that one. But what is land for in national parks? It's a national park, but what is land for in 2022? Green and secure energy, tree planting, nature recovery, private investment offsetting initiatives, global uncertainty, food security, food production, cultural connectedness, public enjoyment access, livelihoods for local people and communities. You pick your choice, or you take all of them, because it is all of them, and that's what we're being asked to do. I love the contrast with 1947. Here is a national park which is finally free from serious problems. What a wonderful time it was, and what great figures, but you know, times have moved on and it's quite a challenge. So really, the nub of today is a moment on that continuum to think about which way for land and the farmers whose choices it is. And Hilary Adair, one of my favourite Exmoor artists, has a painting, Two Roads Divided in the Yellow Wood, so you're not surprised when I talk about Robert Frost. I'm telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood. And I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. We can't go back from today, and the decisions we make in the next couple of years are critical. So a better title for my talk may have been, What Did Farming Ever Do for Us? The value of cultural farm landscapes for nature recovery and climate action. And this is a leaflet produced by the Lake District National Park to encourage farmers to apply into their Farming in Protected Landscapes programme for some of the cultural assets on farm. And we're already talking with the Lake District about how we can work together on some of these areas. So I think there's never one title, is there? But I've ended up with a title that I hope probably does more justice to what I've said. Thank you.